I also wrote a little book about my time in Uganda and trying to address the question of my own cultural identity. Who am I? Am I Ugandan in some ways? Am I non-Ugandan in other ways?
Where did you land with that question?
Where did I land? It's such an interesting question. What your cultural identity consists of. And I think it consists of different layers of your being. When my wife was Ugandan, passed away about 10 years ago, it actually brought to me a crisis of identity because I realized to a large extent I was legitimizing myself as Ugandan through her. So yes, I'm Ugandan, I'm married to a Ugandan woman, and I subsume myself into her to some great extent. When she passed away, suddenly this link vanished. And ironically, that is the time when I acquired Ugandan citizenship. So that made me to renegotiate my identity.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're listening to us from. Welcome to Footprints, a podcast where we hear the stories of our elders and glean the wisdom from their lessons. This is part 2 of my conversation with John de Coninck, and we ended the last conversation speaking about the role of culture in development and what, in a sense, the colonial project undid in creating this binary where culture that didn't look like theirs was bad, and therefore it needed to be discarded and replaced, subsumed with theirs, and what that has done and the ripples it has to this day, where, John, you said young people now are not able to communicate with their elders because one of the things that was usurped was language, and other effects as we feel them, of course. On the flip side, though, do you think there are still people that are passionate about and championing rooting or rerouting of culture as central to our way of life?
Yes. I think there has been a change in the discourse. There's been a change, actually. I must give it to government policies in some ways, which started way back with the introduction of the thematic curriculum in primary schools. That was really the first time when there was a realization that teaching young people in the local language was both desirable but also very effective in terms of learning processes. It has come with its challenges.
And it's literally taking us back to where our parents started when we started school.
That's right.
Years 1 to 3 were done in the local language, and then you did English maybe in P5, 6, 7.
Yes.
You know.
But at the same time, interestingly enough, then you'd have some parents say, well, I'm paying school fees. Am I paying school fees for my children to learn my language or to learn English, which will be the key to a future job? Yes. So there are very interesting dynamics around that. But there's been a change. There is an interest in culture, in history that is developing. We still lack a ministry of culture, which, this being said to Amin, was nurtured in Amin's time, and then when he was deposed, eventually it vanished. So at the moment, we're one of the very few countries in the world without a ministry of culture. That must say something.
Yes.
So I've been involved with UNESCO for some years, and it's quite embarrassing because you go to these meetings of UNESCO, bringing all those hundreds of countries together, and you meet the Minister of Culture from this place, from that place, from that place, and then you look at our Ugandan delegation, and they are from the Ministry of Gender and Social Development. So,
at some point it was gender culture. Is it still?
Yes, it is. It is still.
So it was subsumed.
But it's just a small department. Yes. But still, there has been a change. There are champions of the local culture, looking at culture in a more positive way than was the case in the past. I look at, as I said, the heritage clubs in schools. I mean, it's really developed really well. And as far as I know, very few of these clubs have actually folded. It started, I think, in 2015, so like 10 years now. So yes, I think there are some signs that even our president has, in some ways, has a great love for his culture and his language and his proverbs and so on.
Yes.
So yeah, I think there are some,
There's hope.
There's hope, and there's hope in young people. There's hope in young people who come. And the last project I worked on at the Cross Cultural Foundation of Uganda was to develop a railway museum, which is located in Jinja, at the old railway station in Jinja. And one of the interesting things about that museum is that it has become self-sufficient financially, partly because so many children and young people go there, in hundreds and thousands. So there is this yearning to learn more about your parents, your grandparents, how they lived. So if the opportunity is there, the opportunity is taken up. So it's a good
and
thing.
Footprints falls right in that.
Exactly.
That's what we like to do.
Thanks for giving a voice to all of us.
So, John, another thing that I know that you played a critical role in is self-regulation for the non-profit sector. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, right. Well, it really stems from my earlier work with the Community Development Resource Network. That, as I explained last time, it was developed as a kind of support infrastructure for the burgeoning NGO and CBO fraternity at that time in the 90s and the 2000s. What became evident at that time is that there was a desire from government to regulate NGOs, particularly NGOs, rather than CBOs, particularly NGOs. There's a desire to regulate NGOs that at that time were really unregulated. And there was an act, but it was very loose, which had been passed, I think, as soon as government came to power. I think it was 1986, 1987, around that time. But they wanted to tighten things up. And there was a feeling at that time that why don't we try, and why don't we recognize that there are some real governance gaps in our sector, and why don't we try and regulate ourselves? Hence the idea that was developed of the QAM. The QAM stands for Quality Assurance Mechanism for NGOs, and that took the form of quality standards. There were about 50 quality standards that one had to, as an NGO, that one had to meet in order to qualify as a bona fide NGO. It has had a very checkered experience. I'm not quite sure how well it is doing at the moment. At one point, government got very interested and wanted to incorporate the QAM into the second version or third version of its NGO regulation bill, whatever it was called at that time. This, to some extent, was resisted by NGOs who said, no, the QAM belongs to us. We want to administer it ourselves, and we have a functioning mechanism that is there. I think to some extent in the policy it was incorporated in there, which had plus and minuses. At the moment, I don't think it has moved as much as I would have wished it had moved, because in other countries, including African countries, self-regulation is something that is working.
Yes.
So I would hope that the current generation of NGOs are going to pick up the idea and promote it more. All the more necessary now that I'm afraid that the corruption virus has infected the NGO sector in ways that are not much talked about, but that definitely exist. I was shocked the other way to hear about the kinds of salaries that some heads of NGOs are getting, while saying they want to eradicate poverty in our country. You give yourselves millions and millions of shillings as salary. To me, that is corruption it is moving away from what should be your value base. And the Quam is very much built on set of values, not technocratic things that you are supposed to go through, but you need to demonstrate that you adhere to certain values. So I think this is all the more necessary now. And I would just hope that it moves forward.
Before I ask you about the now, what was it like though as you were traveling around the country to hear from the non-profit sector about the standards that they should adhere to? What was that like?
I think there was a good process to establish the Quam where different teams went around the country to try and develop and refine those quality standards because that's really the core of the Quam. There was a lot of buy-in. I think the difficulty has been not so much in terms of buying in, but in terms of the administration of the system. Because while it is a self-regulatory mechanism, you still need to have some kind of structure that will deliver, so to speak, your Quam certificate or deny your Quam certificate. So it can't be entirely self-driven. So you need to have and we developed those structures at district level, at national level, and so on. But this has been problematic. It was developed in such a way that it wouldn't require much funding. But I think it's not been as successful as I would have.
Yeah. And maybe there is an opportunity, and I have attended meetings where the sector is discussing the Quam and how to improve it and how to increase uptake. There have been conversations with donors about, instead of you doing your own due diligence, if an organization has a Quam certificate, can that be part of what you use as proof that this is a partner that is serious and all those kinds of things? So I think there is the appetite to say what more can we do as we seek to become better, as we serve the people that we serve. You are in a different season now of your life in terms of retired but not tired, as the elders now say. What is it like for you in this season?
Well, I think one should not say that retirement is easy, and therefore one tends to run away from retirement as a point in your life where you can say, well, on 1st of January of this particular year,
I put down my pens. Yes.
So I've not gone down that road. I left my position at the Cross Cultural Foundation, again with a feeling as before with CDRN that a new team had to take over in order to ensure that the organization becomes sustainable. And of course, there was always this question at the back of people's minds and also at the back of my mind. Who am I as a white man born thousands of miles away from here? Who am I to talk about Ugandan culture? That's always been quite problematic for myself. It's been a tension. So leaving CCFU and leaving it to a new generation of authentic Ugandans.
Yes. Of real.
The real ones.
Real Ugandans.
I think that was good. And the new team is really doing well. Of course, one can always have criticism and say, I wouldn't have done it that way and so on. But I decided I give them space to do whatever they feel is needed. And I think on the whole, they've done extremely well, and I congratulate them. So have I retired? No, I've not retired. I think to retire 100% would get me very depressed because I tend to be very much animated by action.
Yes.
So the end of action will be for
another time. But still, it is a season of change.
It is okay. It is a season of change. So my position now is to do less work, but still to be quite engaged. I've been involved in different projects on a part-time basis, still with a strong cultural emphasis. So I've been working in other countries as well, which is very interesting, other African and Middle Eastern countries. I've recently been involved in a project where historical buildings would be protected from the effects of climate change in 6 different countries. Very interesting work, but not too onerous. So I don't take on the management responsibility, but I take more of a sort of support and mentoring role, which I think is a nice way to slowly reduce my level of engagement, but at the same time feeling engaged. I also wrote a little book about my time in Uganda and trying to address the question of my own cultural identity. Who am I? Am I Ugandan in some ways? Am I non-Ugandan in other ways? So I enjoyed doing that.
Where did you land with that question?
Where did I land? Well, without an answer. Without an answer.
Are there days when you feel one more than the other, or how do you...
Yes,
is there a
certain
balance?
days, certain times, depending, of course, where I am. I no longer go to Belgium much because I no longer have family, no longer have relatives there. But something that is so important about one's culture is food. So you give me a Belgian dish and I will still relish it because it connects with my Belgian antecedents. But at the same time, you give me some good matoke and binyebwa really cooked well, or some luombo, I will also enjoy that. But it's interesting. It's such an interesting question. What your cultural identity consists of. And I think it consists of different layers of your being. So in my case, in some ways, I'm Belgian. In some ways, I'm also British because my mother was British. I'm also Ugandan in some ways because I live here. My family my children consider themselves almost 100% Ugandan. But it's something that you can never resolve. I'll give you an example of this. And that is that when my wife, who was Ugandan, passed away about 10 years ago, it actually brought to me a crisis of identity because I realized to a large extent I was legitimizing myself as Ugandan through her. So yes, I'm Ugandan. I'm married to a Ugandan woman. I've been married to her for many years. And I subsume myself into her to some great extent. When she passed away, suddenly this link vanished. And ironically, that is the time when I acquired Ugandan citizenship. So on the one hand, there I was, having this blue little booklet, a new passport. But on the other hand, there was this side of, as I say, my legitimacy that had gone. So that made me to renegotiate my identity. So it changes in very interesting ways and sometimes really unexpected ways.
And I guess, even speaking about the question of retirement, it is a renegotiation of identity. I used to work 5 days a week, 12 months a year, and now I have to renegotiate a new self. And I guess that's part of the changes that people contend with in this new season of life. John, I wanted to ask you, because interestingly, you've set up 2 organizations and you have seeded them to other people. What is that like, that moment of decision? Do you make it as you're starting? Do you make it in? How do you rumble with that? What was your experience?
I think it would be a bit arrogant to say that right from the start of this organization, I was already thinking about the phase out. And that was not the case. But it did come up fairly soon after setting up this organization from 2 different perspectives. For CDR and the first organization, which was this sort of support function for the NGO sector, one of our work was in organizational development. And in organizational development, one of the things you learn and you discuss and reflect on is organizational sustainability. So it would have been very strange to encourage others to move away from the founder syndrome that NGOs at that time were being very much the victim of, because they were new organizations. So you had all these people who had quite an aura about them, and to tell them, well, why are you thinking about how you're retiring? When you are retiring, and what are you leaving behind? It would have been quite hypocritical to engage with others in these kinds of discussions without walking the talk. So I did think about ways in which, first of all, you strengthen organizational culture, because that's the most important. And that's what needs to survive after you've left. So in what ways can you strengthen organization culture? And then how do you establish the mechanisms that are going to ensure that whoever takes over from you is going to adhere to this culture? The first organization, it worked for some years, but unfortunately then the person I passed, the person who was in charge passed on, and it proved very difficult to sustain that culture, but it also proved very difficult to remain relevant, because the NGO sector was changing a lot at that time, and many individuals were engaging in consultancy work. That was very tempting at that time, because consultancy work was very well remunerated.
Absolutely.
So maybe, CDRN is moribund now. It still exists on paper, but it's moribund. Yes. But maybe its time was over.
Also, yes.
I remember there was one thing we talked about in those days in organizational and development work was strategic funerals for organizations. So you can also prepare for the funeral of your organization, which is fine. It's very legit.
In fact, we often talk about retirement or leaving of leaders, and we very often don't think about maybe sometimes your organization also has to leave a space because it came, it was there for a reason, it served its purpose. Exactly. And like you said now, it's time for a strategic.
Yes, exactly. And these days, you couldn't reinvent CDRN. Its time is past.
Yes.
Now with CCFU, as I was explaining, there was this tension of having a sort of quasi-Ugandan running an organization, talking 100% of the time of Ugandan culture. Yes. So it was also natural for me to leave, and our director also, Emily, my friend Emily Drani, who was the director of the organization, also felt that it was important to leave the place to a new generation. Mm-hmm. So we actually both left, not at the same time. It was organized in such a way that there would be a phased exit. And actually recently, CCFU came back to us and said, well, could you come and help us for a few things here and there? And I think that's quite a healthy way to renew relationships, but not take up any kind of management role again, not to move backwards. So have to move forward.
Indeed. And John, as we end this conversation, we came to you because you are a Muzei. What lessons for you have endured through your life in terms of either leadership or just how to do life that you would like to share with us?
Gosh, I wish you prepared me for this question months ago. What can I say? I think what has animated me is lessons that I learned from my days in primary school. Mm-hmm. I went to a primary school. I was very lucky. I went to a primary school that developed a sense of social obligation, where you are not the center of the world, but you are only the center of the world insofar as you could do good in your environment. And that is what I think, it sounds very sort of altruistic. But that's what's really animated me, I think, for so many years. It's been, and it's, of course, over the chapters of my life, it's taken different different roles. In this primary school, eventually I went back to that same school in secondary school, and I became the student leader of the school. So that was one way of, I guess, fulfilling a desire that I had to try and improve my local environment. Similarly, at university, I was almost thrown out because I was very much involved in the students' movement at that time in the late 60s, early 70s, which was directed towards social justice. And then my university life was very much not about accumulating titles and publications and so on, but trying to see my role as one of mentoring and helping people to grow and to develop their potential. And my work in the NGO sector has similarly been, I think, to develop people's potential and perspectives and trying to make our country as democratic as one can make it in the current circumstances, which, as we all know, is quite a struggle.
The struggle continues to do good.
To do good, yeah, it's true.
Yes. John, thank you so much for your time. Mr. Oh, you said we call you Muchibi. Muchibi, webale nnyo. Tujangu okwo. Our listeners, thank you so much for sitting down with us and listening to this conversation. And we look forward to hosting you again when you sit down with us to have a conversation with another elder. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.